One of the more challenging and rewarding things that we have to experience are intimate relationships. So in this video, I'm going to answer the question and talk about whether or not it's easier to really get to know yourself and really grow as a person by yourself, away from intimate relationships, or whether it's easier to grow as a person and get to know yourself in an intimate relationship. And this is based on a question that I received from someone recently, which is basically this question. So, in my view and my experience, and again, this may not be true for everyone because we all have a different path, we all have different mindsets, and whether or not it's easier to get to know yourself by yourself or in a relationship is kind of like, is it easier to sit on a couch or is it easier to go out and actually exercise, go out and actually do something? You know, when you're sitting on the couch, obviously that's easy and it's lazy, but the amount of progress that you can make in that action is very limited. Whereas if you actually go out and do something, if you say you go out and work out, at first it's kind of hard to get going, but then once you get going, you kind of get in the flow of it and it becomes easier as you go along. And the amount of things that you can accomplish, the amount of results that you get are drastically increased. Likewise, by yourself, if you steer away from intimate relationships, you can learn about yourself, you can grow as a person, but the amount of results you're going to get in a certain period of time are going to be diminished in comparison, in contrast with what you could get in an intimate relationship. Because we live in a world of contrast, and we only know one thing in contrast with another. So likewise, you might be feeling pretty good right now, but that's only because in the back of your head, you're comparing it to a time when you felt pretty bad. Or the opposite, you might be feeling kind of bad right now. Maybe your leg hurts, maybe your lower back hurts, maybe your neck's tight. But that's only in comparison to the opposite, which is, pleasure or relaxation or calmness. Likewise, when you're hungry, you're just comparing it with how you feel in your head when you feel full, hot, cold, on and on and on. So when we get in relationships, we need this contrast to remind us of ourselves, remind us of what we're afraid of, what our issues are, all of these things. And then to take it a step further, to take it beyond contrast, often we attract people who remind us of ourselves, who remind us of parts of ourselves that we don't really like or we're trying to really suppress. So what happens is this thing called projection, which is we look out into the world, we look out at other people, and we point our finger at them and we say, I don't like that, why does she do this, why does he do that? When in reality, in a lot of cases, it's very common that what we're actually pointing our finger at is something within ourselves that we need to really look at and address. Maybe it's something we're doing. So if we look at someone and say, oh, they're so lazy, they're so sloppy, maybe that's because in some parts of our life, we're lazy and we're sloppy and we're just not choosing to recognize that. So then that's usually what breaks down relationships, is this whole, well, she does this and he does that and I don't like this. It's this whole pointing the finger blame game kind of a mentality, which often ruins relationships, which, that's an entirely different conversation, but what the function of an intimate relationship can be is to remind you of those parts of yourself that you're trying to not acknowledge, that you're trying to suppress. But the benefit of that is that if you can acknowledge that and work through the discomfort that comes up, because these parts of ourselves sometimes aren't always that good. Sometimes they are very good. Sometimes a person reminds us of things that are very positive and amazing, but sometimes it's not very positive, not very amazing. It's kind of something we wish people really didn't know about us. And that's often what happens in these relationships, is that all of our barriers come down, all of our guards come down, all of our masks, our persona, everything just kind of get chiseled away, and what we really have inside of us, what we really have, starts to come out and starts to show itself. So the last point I want to make is that for whatever reason, as counterintuitive as it is, to strangers we're often much kinder and more accepting and loving sometimes than we are to the people that we're intimate with, that we're close to. We would never think of saying some of the things or thinking some of the things that we do about maybe our intimate or the people that are closest to us that we would about strangers. So maybe in an intimate relationship, we can be petty, we can be judgmental, we can be very harsh, and sometimes even just cruel and mean. But to a total stranger, we would never do that. We would never think to do such a thing. And it's very counterintuitive and it doesn't make any sense. But what it illustrates is that for whatever reason, those emotions, those behaviors, those patterns and habits are within inside of us, and we keep them suppressed down because we don't want the world to see these parts of ourselves, so they can only come out in this more intimate, in this more safe space, if you want to call it that, which to me indicates that it's a prime opportunity for personal growth and expansion, self-exploration, and discovery. So I'm be interested to hear your thoughts on this, what your experience has been. So if you have any questions or comments, post them below, and I'll talk to you.